Great.
So welcome to this evening to our talk on eco-anxiety, a call to action, particularly thinking about supporting children and young people. So I just want to start off this evening by acknowledging that how hungry we are to know what to do for the best. Lots of people have signed up for this call to come along and to watch the recording, and we're all so welcome here. And just recognizing that what we share is a real, such a desire, such a thirst to know how best to support ourselves, how best to support the children in our lives and our community with what we're facing in climate crisis, in ecological crisis, in the COVID pandemic. These are seriously challenging times. And I would like to acknowledge that although this is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and studying, I feel like I know nothing. I'm just acknowledging that I am coming from my framework of study, and that might have some wisdom in it, and it might be completely missing something. So I just want to invite you to feel your own body's wisdom as you listen. Please take whatever is useful to you. And if there's something that feels wrong in you, leave it. Let me know, maybe. But just want to recognize that I have my own limited understanding of the world, and that this is my best go right now at addressing this subject. So I want to have an intention for this evening to really serve the children and young people of the world, to really hold them in our hearts and in our awareness, that we are willing to step up for them, because they really need us. They really need us. And I want to speak courageous truths about the challenges that we face. And I want to speak with deep compassion for how much we are struggling, and how much we don't know, and how hard we try, and how much we get it wrong, and how difficult it is to feel ourselves to be whole. And I want to speak with some fierce love, that in the ways that our societies are not serving life, I want to be able to speak some fierce truth to that. So those are my intentions for this evening, and I'd like to invite you just to take a moment to notice what is it that brings you here? What is it that you are wanting to find in this subject? What's the longing in your heart? What's the feeling in your body? For those of you here live, if there's anything that you would like to share in the chat about that, please feel free. Sometimes that helps connections. Elizabeth, is it okay to mute this? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's dive into this subject, eco-anxiety. So we're going to look first at, well, I'll show you. We're going to look at what do I mean by the climate and nature crisis. I realise that some of you here are already completely immersed in this and know way more than I do about it, but I just want to say something about the the premises I'm working from. And then we're going to look at what is eco-anxiety, what do we mean by that, how do children, young people experience it, how do we experience it, some recent research on it and some of my particular concerns. And then we're going to spend a lot of the time on how do we help. I've got a sort of 7-step model to offer you about things that I think are needed. I just want to take a moment to sort out I can hear the microphone is going backwards and forwards. Is it okay? Could you make sure you're on mute, please? Not, I think.
Everyone is muted, so it might just be feedback your end, Jo. I'll keep.
No, there wasn't. It's just changed. I've seen it. Somebody went off. Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, so to just remind us at the beginning that we often talk about the importance of connection with nature, and I just want a reminder of who we are. We are nature. Humans are part of nature, and I think that's one of the things we need to come back to, that we're not separate. And I want to invite you, because we're going to be talking about some challenging things, I want to invite you to really feel how your body is connected to the earth. It might be through the chair you're sitting on and the legs of that chair on the floor, and there might be a whole other room underneath you before you get to the foundations, but let yourself feel where you are connected with the ground. And let yourself feel how deep that goes and how sustained and supported you are. And I'd love to invite you to come back to that feeling anytime during this evening. So let's have a look. Climate. You know, people talk about climate change and the climate crisis. I just want to acknowledge that that's become a sort of shorthand for climate and ecological emergency. Michelle Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, she describes the triple planetary crises of climate change, pollution, and nature loss. But it's not just about nature and environment and climate. It's the impact that has on the whole of life. We have mass extinction. We have whole areas of the world becoming uninhabitable, huge habitat loss, and a very significant and growing impact on human life too. So looking at the human part of that, this is just a little bit of the human systems that are part of this whole story of climate crisis. We have vast inequality around the world of resources, vast differences in power, and differences in the impact of climate change. We know probably from the news that the famine at the moment in Madagascar, that is so clearly a climate change disaster, people starving there. And there is, you know, if there was more aid and more sharing of resources, that would be, lives would be saved immediately. And so it's human systems that are really getting in our way. And some of those systems involve capitalism, the use of the earth's resources as free things that people can own and use, fossil fuels obviously, but many other things, and a whole system of productivity and growth, which is making it so challenging to turn around. We have a history of colonization, very strongly from European countries into the global south, that are really causing systems that anti-life systems. We have social inequality of lots of different things: gender, race, age, disability, neurodiversity, health, sexuality, all these, the vast inequality. And one of those things which I think is, I would like to see named more often, is the marginalization of children and young people's voices and needs. We theoretically have children's rights, but so often children's needs go unmet, and there is certainly in the US and in the UK and other countries a lack of care over children's needs and the needs of the families who are looking after them. And within that is the breakdown of our extended families and our villages. So just to say a little bit more about the challenges we're talking about that we're looking at climate change causing, we're already living in a global pandemic. Just think about 2 years ago, we couldn't have imagined this. We couldn't have imagined what we've been through in the last couple of years and what the world is still going through. We're looking at food shortages all around the world, loss of power, increased poverty, climate refugees in millions, mental health crisis everywhere, school closures as an example, something we've already been through recently. So we've already had a taste of this social disruption and there is more to come. The reason I'm saying all this is because of the need to really face why it is that we have to step up into something new. It's not working. And the reason our children are anxious is because they have something to be anxious about. The future that they're growing into is very, very frightening. So let's have a look at eco-anxiety. What's eco-anxiety? So one way of saying it would be, it's the emotional, social and physical distress that people feel in the face of climate and ecological crisis, or as the American Psychiatric Association says, chronic fear of environmental doom. So basically, it's about knowing what's happening and finding that very frightening. It's not an imaginary fear. It's a healthy and congruent response to what is happening. The bit of it that isn't healthy is the anxiety that comes from being alone with those big feelings. And this is the main thing that I want to address. We can't make it all better for our children and young people or ourselves, but what we can do is not be alone with it and not leave our children alone. And I'm hoping this evening I'm going to show you how very powerful that is, how much we can do to protect our children from the ongoing and debilitating anxiety that comes from being on your own in the fear of social environmental collapse. So I think it's really important to, when people talk about anxiety, we see it as a pathology in our psychological models. We say, oh, that child or that person has something wrong with them that we need to fix with counselling or therapy or some sort of treatment for that one person. And this is a social illness, illness is the wrong word, a condition, a challenge. So we need to look at it on a paradigm level, on a whole system level. And that's what I'd like to do this evening. So I want to say a little bit more about mental health and how much it matters, because often climate crisis is talked about in terms of physical impact. And of course, that goes with our society's sort of our ability to see physical health as more tangible than mental health. But mental health is the heart of healthy functioning and action. It's what makes it possible to get up each day and participate in the world. It's the foundation of keeping ourselves physically healthy. It's the foundations of being able to contribute to society. It really matters, and yet it is so neglected. I'm looking at the moment at the wave of the surge of mental health problems in this country, in the UK, as a result of lockdowns over the pandemic. And I'm looking at how vulnerable I feel and other people feel, and how so much of normal life has gone, and we don't know what's happening next. And it's impacting our communities. And I'm looking and seeing that I would like it to be given more attention. So I want to say something about children's mental health specifically, and some research from the NHS this year showed that 1 in 6 children, so this is children between 5 and 16, so 1 in 6 children were identified as having a probable mental health problem. 4 years ago, that was 1 in 9. So it's gone up a lot, and noticeably since the pandemic. That's 5 children in every classroom. I think that might be a fairly conservative guess, to be honest, because I don't know about you, but if I know many families with children and young people who are having strong struggles with their mental health, and yet they're not known by the NHS because doctors are saying we can't help. There is no service to refer you to. So these are the children who are getting through the system and being recognised. But in the NHS research, they also showed that 80% of young people with mental health needs agreed that the coronavirus pandemic had made things worse. I'm wanting to tell you this to understand the foundation that climate crisis and climate anxiety hasn't arrived onto a blank slate. We're already in a mental health crisis for children. Mind did a report this year. Mind is a mental health charity in the UK, and they did a report that I really recommend you reading called Not Making the Grade, and this was research in secondary schools, so 11 to 18-year-olds, and they were asking students and teachers. Listen to this number, is staggering. 96% of the young people they asked said that their mental health had affected their schoolwork. 96%. And then 48%, so half of those people, said that they'd been punished because of it. I'm going to come back to this, but I think that's a staggering and outrageous statistic. So just to say before we come to thinking, well, what are we going to do about this? I want to say something else about climate anxiety specifically. A very recent report came out in September from Caroline Hickman and her colleagues at the University of Bath and colleagues around the world. They researched they surveyed 10,000 young people, actually not children, young people aged 16 to 25 in 10 countries. I recommend you looking that up, but I just want to give you a few of the findings that they had. 84% of young people around the world, 82% in the UK, are worried about the impact of climate change. So it's affecting is causing them some anxiety. 45% of global youth, and that's 26% in the UK, say that climate anxiety and distress is affecting their daily lives and functioning. So nearly half of young people around the world say that climate anxiety is affecting how they can function day by day. An interesting thing for me is that almost half of those surveyed said when they talked with others about climate change, they felt ignored or dismissed. That's the bit that we're going to change. And 58% said that governments were failing them and future generations. So there is a level of, and this survey has been revolutionary or original in showing this, how betrayed young people feel by the adults in charge. And I think that's another reason that it's urgent that we step up and show that adults are really participating and making a difference here. This is, they also asked, this same survey asked young people how they felt about their different feelings. And I just want to show you this graph because I want you to see the sort of range of feelings that people identified. And I want to invite you just to notice how many of these do you relate to? How many of these feelings do you feel in the face of climate change? Certainly when I look at this list, I would tick pretty much most of them. Maybe not optimistic and definitely not indifferent. Sad, afraid, anxious, angry, powerless, helpless, guilty, ashamed, despair, hurt, grief, depressed. I know some of you are here because the children that you love or that you care for are already feeling some of these feelings, and you're wondering how you can best help them. And some of you might be here because you see this coming. Some of you may be here because you feel these things yourself. So I want to take a minute. I've got a picture of these woods with sunlight, just to invite you to take a moment to really feel yourself again as part of nature. And just notice for a moment how you feel in your body. The things I've just said are really impactful. They are strong, important, and urgent things. And sometimes it's really difficult to be able to face the size of it. And that's one of the things that stops us being available for our young people, is when we can't bear it ourselves. So I'm just leaving a moment for you to notice.
Sorry, Mummy.
Notice how you are. And maybe your body wants to fidget or wriggle, or it might help to roll your shoulders or move your posture to help your body regulate, to help your body adjust. One of the reasons younger children move so much is that they are finding, they're regulating how their bodies and their feelings and their actions. It's a time of learning how to be in a growing body that has so much power and choice. And I think one of the great mistakes that adults make is asking children to sit still. It's not a good thing for us to learn to just sit still despite what's going on for us. And that's the advantage of being on Zoom, because we're not in a room together. You can walk around, stretch, yawn and fidget. So welcome. So I want to offer a framework of 3 stories of this time. I found this really helpful in talking to my daughter about climate change, but I also find it helpful as a map for myself. So these 3 stories are about just the ways that we can make meaning of and understand what's going on and what we're facing. So the first story, Just Keep Going, is all about let's just keep going on with what we've got. I can't imagine anything different. If we've got any problems, let's solve it with the same thing. Capitalism can let's just design a new technology and sell it. Let's keep revising for our maths GCSEs, because you can't do anything in life without a maths GCSE. Let's keep our nose to the grindstone and keep paying our mortgage, keep going with the values that we have at the moment, and keep putting pressure on children to do well at school. We've got the scenario of catastrophe. So in this story, in the story of catastrophe, we are absolutely focused on what a complete disaster we are facing. There's no point in doing any of those old things, because the world is burning. It's a panic. It's urgent. Everything is different and spoiled and ruined. There's a nightmare happening. And then the third story is the story of change. The story of, okay, this isn't working. This is not working. We need to change, and we need to change radically. And what are we going to do in in that story, there is possibility of new things that we haven't found, new ways of being, or maybe old ways of being that we need to go back to. So my sense is that there is truth in all of these stories. And right now we are in a place of having, being part of each story. And my sense is that there is some choice to be made about which of these stories we are going to take on as our guiding light. There is truth in the catastrophe story, and that's what makes it so urgent. But it's not enough just to stay there, because then where is the point or meaning of doing anything? And for me, the story of change allows new possibilities. So when, I suggest when we're talking with children about climate anxiety, that we might tell them these stories, we might point out that there's these, and that when we're sharing information and ideas, that we really build on that story of change, so that we make sure to research for ourselves, what are people doing, what ideas are people coming up with, and that we share those with our young people, especially change that young people and children are involved with. There are children all over the world who are taking their governments to court. I think we could be sharing that with our children to show how much power they can have. So I'm going to just spend a bit of time now talking about the heart of human needs, because I think that sheds a lot of light on the whole issue of anxiety, because anxiety comes up when those needs aren't met enough, and this information I'm about to share with you gives us it gives us so much to work with, and it gives us a really good map, if you like, or a starting point. So just to sort of summarize this bit, and my knowledge here comes from the study of neurobiology and human evolution and child development. So what's clear over and over again is that humans have evolved over millions of years, but specifically our version of humans over 200,000 years, we've evolved for connection. Relationship is the heart of who we are. It's our most basic need. It's hard to even have the language. Our language doesn't give us the language and the words and the expressions to convey accurately enough how much there is no such thing as a separate human being. I've been really enjoying hearing the neuroscientists who are studying sort of really, really sort of boffin type science that is way over my head, that they're saying, wow, everything we do is just showing that there is no such thing as an individual human being. Like, we cannot function or grow except in the context of other people. Now, at the heart of this connection is emotions. Emotions are at the heart of our relationships and our physical development. So the emotional experience that we have as children and throughout our lives creates the building of our brains, nervous systems, and immune systems. So we're all about emotion, but we're living in a culture, or in cultures, who have largely disrespected emotion at the expense of thinking and rationality, as if we have this idea that we should be rational. So somebody might say to you, well, there's no point in worrying about it because there's nothing you can do. And nobody ever said there was a point to worrying, apart from to provoke action, I suppose, or to seek connection. Anyway, I'm talking about this now because, of course, climate change and the science around climate change evokes big emotions. And sometimes when we talk about it and when it's reported in the news and when it's taught in schools, the emotions are taken out of it. And that's a big gap. So the neurobiology of human development is that we grow and we function in relationship with our loved ones. Babies, children, and continuing through life, we need warm care from others. So children need warm adult care in order to learn and develop healthily. And that's pretty much the main thing I'm wanting to share, is that it's all about how do we build warm adult care, because there's a lot that gets in the way of it. There's a lot culturally that interrupts that. But in order for a baby to develop a healthy, resilient brain that's going to last them their whole lives, they need the sort of connection that you can see in this picture. I don't mean they need to be thrown up in the air all the time, but the light in their parents' eyes, the intensity of connection and being loved, wanted, welcomed, accepted, to feel that there's someone in the world that they feel safe with, who understands them and who can make sense of them. That's our deepest longing and our deepest need. It's what we were born for. It's how we've evolved to grow everything we need. And we live in societies that don't recognize that. And so we all have gaps there. And I think that's the biggest healing we can do, is to heal those gaps. Because a child who has enough warm, responsive adult care will grow to be resilient and emotionally intelligent and flexible and adaptable and creative and collaborative and clear thinking. So when I say connection, I don't mean that in any romantic sense. I mean, I do as well. It's poetic and beautiful. But I also mean that physically, our bodies, brains, and nervous systems actually literally and physically tune into each other. It's totally out of our choice. We don't know that we're doing it, but it's very real. So it's like we go around scanning our environment all the time with various brain cells and nervous system cells that then copy what we see. So if we're around somebody who's really stressed, our stress system gets activated. So in families, if parents are stressed and challenged, then children will pattern their own nervous systems to match. Now, I want to make the very important point that everything we know about the importance of parenting has led to parents being blamed, therefore, whenever something goes wrong with their child, whenever their child is challenged or someone's not liking their behavior or they're unhappy, the first place to look is, oh, well, what's the parenting like? But what isn't said enough is that what's very clear is that as adults, we don't have the capacity to look after children by ourselves. We're supposed to be in big extended communities, in tribes and in villages of people where someone looking after a small child is supported by a whole bunch of other adults. Someone holds the baby while the mother sleeps after the baby's born. Someone cooks the food. Someone does the cleaning. God, that sounds like a dream, doesn't it? Can you imagine if you're a parent having that level of support, just never being on your own, trying to earn the money, cook the food, look after the child, sort out the education, oh my goodness, we're under so much pressure, and that pressure spreads. So when we really understand what's going on with climate science, extinction, social disruption, inequality, it brings up big feelings. It's distressing. And I hope it's clear as I'm taking a step by step that what's needed for big feelings is caring others. Children need caring adults to accompany these big feelings. So when a child's nervous system is agitated because they're upset or frightened or anxious, what they need is a warm, calm somebody else, an adult, to tune into them, to attune to them, and to help their calm be catching, to bring them into a field of calm warmth. When I say calm, I don't mean just chilled out, I mean regulated. I mean not freaking out as well. And that's the challenge here, isn't it? Because as adults, we're all freaking out. We're freaking out too. We don't know what to do. So you can see we're all in this sort of nervous system agitated place. And no wonder there's so much anxiety. We need huge compassion for this. We're facing so much. So I just talked about when we feel, climate science provokes a lot of feelings, and feelings are the root of behavior. When we have strong feelings, it takes us into a sort of activation of our nervous system that we know about as, for example, the fight, flight, and freeze reflex. It's a reflexive biological response in our brain and nervous system. Distress and anxiety come out in behavior. They just do, and it's not a choice. Most behavior that adults don't like in children or each other comes under those categories of fight, flight, or freeze. Aggressive behavior, hiding or avoidant behavior, frozen or passive behavior. Now, at the moment, we live in a culture that punishes behavior like that, that punishes distressed behavior, both in families and in schools. So we have a culture that is not supporting emotional regulation. We have a culture that is holding children responsible for their inability to regulate their feelings, and then we're punishing them for it. And I don't mean just, I'm not talking about physical punishment, although I know in most countries in the world, physical punishment of children is still perfectly legal, including England, including all the states of the United States. But when we punish, the hope behind punishment and reward is the opposite side of punishment, because it's punishing when you don't get the reward when that's offered to others. But the consequence of that, what we're hoping is that it teaches children how to behave. Actually, we're completely mistaken. It teaches children to be more distressed, and then that more distress causes more difficult behavior, until at some point maybe the behavior goes inwards and it becomes self-violent instead of outwardly. But it's never, punishment and reward never provide a resilient development. So what children actually need is adults to be on their side and understand their experience. So we're getting to something really important here. How do we as adults be allies to children and to really show them that we understand what they're going through? So what that needs is warm, attuned empathy, a curiosity about their emotional response, and authentic friendliness, authentic warmth, and I care about you, I'm interested in you. What are you feeling? How is it for you? What is it like being in your world? Oh yeah, I get it. That feeling. I just want to invite you for a minute to think about a time when somebody has given that to you. Do you have a friend, somebody who loves you, who you can go to with your difficult feelings because you know they're going to understand you rather than just try and fix you? Can you call on that experience? And just recognizing that some of us can't. Some of us don't have that experience to call on. Some of us have grown up without anybody ever being curious about how we feel. And some of us haven't found that in our friendship groups yet. But this is what we're going for. We need support too. We can't do this on our own. We can't do this without others at our back. I've already asked you something of how you feel about climate change, and I'm sure there's feelings that are that you're having as you listen to me talk about this. And I'm just wondering, at the moment, how do you get support for your feelings? I know for myself, sometimes I get really good support by going to friends, and going to the friends that I know will listen and not just try and fix me. Sometimes I get support by going for a walk amongst trees, getting some air. Sometimes I try to support my feelings by eating chocolate and watching television or looking at Facebook, and that gives me the support of numbing out for a while, because that's as much as I can do for myself in those moments. Maybe that just keeps me going until I can get more support. How about you? How do you get support for your feelings? And can you identify what it feels like to feel like somebody gets you and cares about you and is there for you? That's what we're wanting to create for our children. And it's shocking how rarely children really feel that. Most of us as adults, we want to fix things for our children. And now here we are faced with something that we can't fix. When Caroline did her that survey that I referred to earlier on with the 10,000 children around the world, 10,000 young people around the world, she said recently that when she presents that information, she gets a lot of feedback from adults saying, oh my God, this is awful, this is horrific, I'm so shocked, it's terrible. And then she gets a lot of feedback from young people saying, thank goodness you're saying this. Now I know that I'm not on my own. I'm so glad to hear what you're saying, because I totally recognize it. And now I know it's not just me. We have so many young people longing for understanding. Okay, so I just want to say a quick thing about ages and stages, that I want to offer you a framework in a minute, 7 steps that I think that we can take to support children and young people. And I think this applies to all ages and other adults actually. And then having said that, it will be different for each child, because each child has different needs, sensitivities, different worries, feelings and capacities. So what we're really talking about is this moment, this child and this relationship. And that's, so I can't give you a script. I can't give you a, this is what you're supposed to say and this is what you're supposed to do. Apart from that, I suppose it comes down to 2 simple things: how you are regulated and supported, and how you can then give your caring attention to your child and be with them in all their big feelings, so they're not on their own with it. It sounds so beautifully simple, doesn't it? Yeah, it's so difficult to really get this. I find it so difficult to, when my daughter says I'm worried about something, I immediately want to say, well, let's do this, let's do that, let's sort it out. What do you want to do? What do you think we should do? And the patience and the skill to just say, yeah, I hear you. You're really worried. Tell me more. Tell me more about your worry. What does it feel like? What else are you worried about? What are you thinking? And just to really listen. It takes such, I've spent many years, my daughter's 15 now, I've spent all of those 15 years trying to learn that and learn that and learn that. And it is delicious when you get it. There's such connection and openness. There's a lot that gets in the way. So I want to say just a quick thing about the first 3 years and a quick thing about teens, because there's something specific about those ages. So the first 3 years, babies are still, they're physically growing their brains from scratch. I mean, not from complete scratch, but they're growing them from the beginning, and in connection with their carers. So the most protective factor here is supported, regulated, responsive parent. So if you're looking after a baby and toddler, the priority here is this is the time when they're growing their emotional intelligence, when they're growing the foundations of resilience that will help them deal with difficult feelings later on. So this is a fantastic time to really practice sorting out your own support networks of people who value your feelings, and responding and noticing and being really curious about all the feelings that your baby and toddler has, and accompanying them in those feelings. So that means, when your 2-year-old is carrying a glass of water across the room and falls over and spills it everywhere, rather than saying, oh no, that's so clumsy, look at this, saying, oh darling, you've fallen over, oh the water's gone everywhere, that's okay, let's clear it up together. I don't know how good an example that was, but just to sort of just recognizing the child, when they hurt themselves, I told you not to run fast downhill, but more like, oh, you were running so fast and then you fell and now your knee hurts. Just being with them in their experience. So this is sort of, I suppose, is my attempt at summarizing some big ideas in this image. A small child staring in wonder at a line of ants watched fondly by a loving parent, is directly linked to the survival of life on Earth. What I'm trying to say here is that in human development, when children are connected with nature and on the earth, in their environment, but not just that. There's lots of people who teach about the importance of nature connection, and it's amazing, nature education and play outside. But what's an important part of it is there's an accompanying adult who's kind and warm and interested and available and loving. And I feel very strongly that it was the breaking of this that has caused the whole climate and ecological crisis, that we lost what it is to be truly human, which is to be connected and in love and in awe and connection with our natural environment. And for me, it all comes back down to that. And I think that is the only hope of anything changing for the future, is that we bring up new generations of children who have that capacity to care about the earth and to have their own wholeness, because they've been held in their strong emotional needs as they've grown up. So just to say something about teens, teens are under huge pressure in our cultures, a lot from school, a lot from peers. There's a huge pressure to grow up, fit in, get it right, feel wrong. The lockdowns have been harsh on them, because this is a time of development when they're moving away from their relationships with their parents towards relationships with peers. And these lockdowns have meant that teenagers have been isolated from each other and stuck with their horrible parents for much too long. Of course, I'm joking about the horrible parents. There's a lot of pressure on education. You've got to succeed at school, otherwise your life is going to be ruined. You've got to get these exams, you've got to study, your whole future depends on it. All the while there are brain changes happening that mean emotional volatility, risk-taking, uncertainty, insecurity. Teens still need very strong adult support, and yet our cultural ideas are that they need independence more. But actually that's not true. They need, yes, more independence and autonomy, but with this very strong safety net of a loving adult. And we live in societies that are hostile towards teenagers. How often do you hear that sort of, oh, teenager, they're being such a teenager. We don't provide them with anything to do, and then we criticize them for leaving litter in places. You know, there's nowhere for them to go. Any public space is now a space where you have to spend money, cafes, or there's no sort of open spaces, inside spaces to keep warm that you don't have to pay to be in, on the whole. And so young people are left, you know, needing to be together and needing to be out of the home, and with very few places to go. So I want to move on to this framework, and oh my goodness, I mean, I've come up with 7 steps that I think are a good start for us. If we want a map, if we want some roadmap of what are we supposed to do, these are the best things I can come up with. And I've looked at them again and again, and I can't find any shortcuts. I'm not offering comforting, it's all going to be okay, children are resilient. People say that, but children are so resilient, aren't they? And I just always want to say, no, they're not. They're vulnerable. Children are adaptable. Yes, they will adapt to whatever we throw at them, but there's great cost when that doesn't meet their needs. So I want to offer this to you, and I hope that some of it is useful, and that I hope that you'll recognize, I hope it validates how much you're already doing. And I hope it might give you ideas about where else to go. And it's based on everything I've said so far. So the first step is about listening to your child, like really, really listen. So, and sometimes we really think we're listening, but actually our attention is already moving on to what we need to try to do to solve this. So I specifically, of course, here mean listen to what your child's saying about how they feel, because we're talking about climate anxiety. So it's an air of empathic curiosity. What is it like being you? What is it like if you can have your feelings and I can just be with you? Oh my God, it's so beautiful not to be on your own. You know, for a child to feel like they can have their feelings and their parent or their teacher or their grandparent, that their adult, can bear it, can be with them in it. So that's a place to start. And it sounds so simple and so obvious, and yet it's so rare for a child to find listening from the adults around them. So if you already think you're good at this, thank you for all the time you've put into that. And also maybe start with beginner's mind and look at that and think, am I really? Notice, ask your child, do you feel like I'm really listening to you? See what they say. So that's the first step. The second step, I reckon, is that we need to educate ourselves about climate change, about the things that they're getting anxious about. We don't need to know everything, but we need to be switched on about it. We need to be aware of what it is that they are dealing with, because otherwise we're really leaving them alone. So many young people are saying to me, it's like we're just being given all the responsibility of saving the world with none of the power and authority it takes to do it. It's such a burden. So if we learn about it, we're taking on some of that burden, and it means we know something. I'm thinking about the story, Greta Thunberg's story was powerful, about how depressed she was for so long and how her parents didn't listen to her about her worries about climate anxiety. And then something shifted and they got on board with it. And it totally changed their relationship, and it changed how able she was to do something, to go out in the world and put her worry into action. So for us, our education needs to include, yes, it needs to include the catastrophe, what the threats that we're under. And with COP26 in the news now, I've really noticed that we're getting more truth about that now. I don't mean necessarily from world leaders. I don't mean at all from world leaders at COP26, but I noticed in the Guardian's Day, for example, a really strong article about the severity and urgency of climate change. So it's becoming more available for us to know about it. But what else we need to know is the positive change story of actions that people are taking. Include your own positive action as well, but mainly learn about it and find support in this. One thing I'd really recommend in this is Thoughtbox have fantastic climate change curriculum, which is really good for adults to learn a lot about climate change and including positive action. I know that Rachel's here on this call, and it's a superb resource, but there are many others, of course, many places we can learn. So step 3, we need support from others engaged with climate change. Some of us, that's already there, but some of us means we need to join things. We can't face it alone. We can't deal with the reality of it on our own. And I've seen many people who've sort of become more informed about climate change and of course want to talk about it, and their existing friends and family aren't in the same place, and they find themselves shut down again and again, and it's lonely and desperate, and they end up feeling like some sort of somebody evangelical trying to wake the world up. So if you're going to start learning about this and engaging with this for your child's sake, you need to be getting support from other adults who are engaged with this, so that you don't have to dump all your old friends, but you might need some new ones. Number 4, it might not be in this order, of course, this is just the order it came to me in. Learn to be with our own strong feelings. So once we start learning more and facing the difficult truth about climate and ecological crisis, we're going to have some strong feelings about it. We already have strong feelings, don't we? We already regularly feel guilty and terrified about our children or our place in the world. But being with our own strong feelings is the heart of our emotional resilience. And it's not easy because many of us have grown up without any support for this. We've grown up in families where our strong feelings were not welcome. And so they feel very threatening to us. That's why we live in a society of so many addictions, because addiction's a way of bearing strong feelings that we can't bear to feel. So there are many approaches to this, and we haven't got time to talk about it today, but there are many, many approaches that support people to become more emotionally resilient. And then, of course, once we can bear our own strong feelings, we can learn to be with and hold our child's strong feelings. So everything that's gone before this has led up to learning to be with and hold our child's strong feelings, because this is the heart of dealing with eco-anxiety in our children, is that we don't leave them on their own with it. As I said, so very few of us have had this ourselves. It's very challenging. And it's not there in the parenting advice, mainly in the parenting books. So we might not have grown up with it. But when we can really be with our child's strong feelings, their nervous system will get wired, and it will grow in a lifelong resilient way. And it's not too late. If you haven't done it yet and your child is already a teen, it's not too late. It's never too late. If your children are grown, it's never too late. Our biology and our nervous system is always adaptable and always able to grow. But we need to start now, actually. We can't wait any longer. Now that we know this, don't put it off. We have to start. And we don't have to be perfect for this. We don't have to get it all right. We just have to start where we can. Step 6, take action. So take action for the planet and support your child's action. So children need to know that the adults are doing something. We need to not make it children's responsibility. Don't come back to, oh, well, as long as you switch the lights off and as long as you recycle things and as long as you go by bike somewhere, then you're going to save the earth. No, we need to be doing our own thing and supporting what our child wants to do. There's a lot more to say about this, but we can come back to it another time. For now, I just want to say that it's been widely found over and over again that being involved in meaningful action is something that really supports climate anxiety. It really helps to diminish the anxiety because we feel purposeful and involved and part of community. So there are many ways to act. I'm not telling you that you have to get out on the streets, but do if you feel up to that, or whatever it is. And if you do that with other people, it becomes even more resilience building. And then step 7. This is a massive one. Practice connected parenting, what I call connected parenting, which is what I've described earlier on. Parenting that puts the relationship really central, that prioritizes the relationship with children above all else, whenever possible. And that means letting go of controlling behavior through punishment and reward, but instead seeing what's underneath it and meeting the needs, the distress that causes the behavior. So it's a big shift on behavior. And yeah, that this takes huge compassion, because we live in a society where behavior and punishment is seen much more clearly than underlying needs. So what we're talking about here is radical system change, which is what we need. We need to be changing many systems in the face of what's happening on our planet. But the way that we treat and bring up children and young people is part of this radical system change. So whether you're parenting or teaching, or whether you're caring for children in your community, each time you meet them with welcome and warmth and empathy and curiosity for how they feel inside, each time you do that, you're building their resilience that will protect them from debilitating climate anxiety. I just want to say a word about schools, because I just want to support parents. If you're a parent, this approach does mean standing up for your child when needed. Sometimes we think we have to support the school over our child, but just wanting to recognise that schools aren't resourced They don't have the training or support or money to really deal appropriately with children's mental health. And they're part of a very big system which is very slow to change. The government is putting teachers under huge pressure, and teachers and other school staff often feel overwhelmed and powerless themselves. And I just want to say, in a quite a challenging way, I know that the education system is not working for children or for climate. It is part of the system that's causing anxiety and difficulty. And yes, let's quickly and urgently, but with a lot of compassion, revolutionize that. But at the moment, if you find that your child is anxious at school and is being harshly treated, then they need you to stand up for them. So just to end what I'm wanting to say, this will change your life. I want to give you a warning. We are talking about massive paradigm change. Luckily, it's really positive paradigm change. All the research and wisdom is showing us the way. There is so much to support us in this, and it is totally worth it. This approach towards more connection, more empathy, more support for our children will lead to more resilient children who will become more resilient adults. It will lead to more rewarding relationships for us now, and it will give us all greater capacity for wise action in the face of what we are all facing, which is urgent and important. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So if you don't want to be in the video, you might want to turn your camera off. I'm trying to stop. Oh no. Okay. Are we still here? Okay. Hi there. It's good to see you still here. It's 20 to 9, so we still have 20 minutes, and I'd really like to invite some questions or thoughts or comments. First, I'm just going to take a moment to enjoy seeing that I'm not all on my own, just in my front room, talking to myself. So if your camera is on, I'd really be grateful if you'd give me a wave to let me know that you're still here. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, thank you for your generosity turning your cameras on. It's so reassuring. Bless you. Thank you. So I would love to, Elizabeth, I think you've been looking at the chat, and you'll see if there's any questions. And if there's any other questions or comments that you'd like to add in the chat, or if you'd like to speak out, if you put your little electronic hand thing on, then that brings you to the top of the screen and we can see you there. Elizabeth, can I hand over to you for a minute to look after that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jo, for that. That was really wonderful. Yeah, there's a couple of questions. First one from Gary. Jo, you empathise the role of parents, but what about the role of teachers and carers? To what extent can they provide the warmth, attention, etc. that you described that some children may not get from their parents?
Oh, thank you so much. That's such an important question. I'm sorry if my intention was not to put that whole thing on parents. It's teachers and other carers, uncles, aunts, grandparents, community members have a massive, massive role to play in this. And you're right, Gary, that so many parents are under so much stress and not supported enough that there are many gaps. Families can't do this all on their own. We should never be left on. We should never have been left to get on with it by ourselves. So teachers have a massive role to play. Children spend so much time at school, and if you think back to your own education, you'll know it's the teachers who showed some care for you, some kindness, who are the ones that are still with you, who had the biggest influence. So vital. And actually I think in schools, teachers and learning support, teaching assistants and learning support workers and school secretaries, school officers, have a huge role to play in bringing warmth to an environment. Children need to feel safe around the adults that they're connected with, the adults whose care they're in. So each time a teacher uses the child's name and shows care and interest in them, they are creating safety, and creating safety allows the the conditions for learning. You know, without that authentic, warm relationship, learning is pretend, and it's not going to last. Especially, sorry, just one more thing about that. There's an increasing, what's the word? It's increasing how much climate science is being taught in schools. And on the one hand, of course, we want children to be learning about this. And on the other hand, I have a lot of concern about it if it's taught in a purely scientific way and without the care and attention given to the feelings it might bring up, and the action that children, the messages about responsibility and action. So I hope that answers that question to some extent.
Thank you, Jo. And I think this probably builds on that. A question from Lauren. Can you give some concrete examples of meeting your children with support in the moment, especially if they're behaving in a way that's generally unacceptable? And when I say unacceptable, I mean behaviours that might not serve them in society or in life.
Yeah, okay. Can I just make sure I've understood that question? Elizabeth, did you say some examples? I missed a bit.
With support in the moment. So I'm thinking, Jo, like about the conversation we had about the importance of eye contact and that holding space. So meeting your child in the moment when they're
okay. How do we support a child in the moment with behavior that is socially very challenging, and ultimately they're going to need to not do that behavior if they want life to be easy? Okay, there's a big yeah, I can, of course, I love doing that. So let's have an example of a child having a sort of meltdown in public, for example, and kicking out, or maybe punching someone at if we're talking about a younger child, punching someone at nursery or something. So and I'm giving an example of a younger child, but actually it's pretty much the same thing for whatever age, just adapted. So the what I would want for that child is to be met with calm, kind, robust firmness. So when I'm talking about warm, empathic response, I don't mean flaky. I mean getting down to your child's level, looking at them in the eye with kind eyes and saying, darling, we're not going to do this here, or I'm not going to let you hit. And it might be taking their hand, it might be moving them out into somewhere that's they've got more freedom to move. It might be, I know you're cross, I know you're tired, or I know, yes, you don't want to be here. It's so boring when adults keep talking all the time and ignoring you. I know you're hungry. Some empathic, kind response, and some boundaries of kind. I saw a fantastic example of a parent shopping, and her 3-year-old was really shouting and screaming, kicking around. She just put her shopping down and walked out with the child, so he had more space, and he ran around, and she waited with him and held him safe until he'd calmed down. And she recognized that the problem wasn't that the child didn't know how to behave. The problem was that he was in a situation he couldn't cope with. So I don't know if that explains enough, but should we think of an example of an older child? Would that be a useful thing, or can you give me an example? Okay, somebody's helped that. Thinking about Faith, thinking about a young person who lives in young people who live in challenging home situations, and schools punish for hitting and anger. That's a fantastic example. Okay, so what I would like to see in schools then is that basically for a young person who's stressed, challenging home situations, they're not getting their needs met for care and safety, is that they're going to be very vulnerable, and being locked in a room with threats hanging over them that if anything happens they're going to be punished is going to just increase the pressure on them, and it's going to be more likely to explode. So in that example, I would want every child to have a safe place and a safe person in the school that they can go to when things get too much. And some schools I've seen do this really well. They give a child, for example, within the system that has very little flexibility. I'd like schools to be completely different, but as they are, I've seen schools who've given a child a card, for example, you know, a yellow card or something, and when and somebody will work with them to help them recognize when their nervous system is starting to lose control. And the yellow card gives them permission to just put it down on the teacher's desk and walk out, and that's recognized as a self-care strategy rather than a defiant oppositional behavior. I'm laughing because I find it difficult to think about how we meaningfully support children when we treat them like prisoners. You know, that basically young people need autonomy and how they learn to deal with their feelings. So what I would want for that child is to be able to leave the classroom and go and find a place and a person that they feel safe with. Another creative example I've seen is when a child's starting to lose it at school, is for the teacher to give them a note and say, could you go and give that to the head teacher? And the note says, this young person needs some care and love. Can you give them that for a while? You know, I don't mean you have to, I don't mean that the teacher's pretending it's something else, you know, that the head teacher is seen as the kind regulator rather than the person that you get sent to for punishment.
Thank you, Jo.
I hope that, I mean, we could talk about this a long time. I know these answers aren't really adequate, but I'm hoping it's giving some sense that kindness doesn't have to be flaky permissive. It can be really clear, like, and I'm not going to let you hit that person. I'm not going to, it's not okay. Everyone here needs to be safe. So that it's like the adult needs to get totally involved. I am standing here and not letting violence happen to you or to them.
And I think it might be helpful to let people know that there is an audio recording of a conversation with Jo that we'll be making available at some point, which talks about some more specific examples of this in a lot more detail and what that empathic holding sort of looks like and feels like. So we'll make sure we get those out to you once they've all been edited.
Oh yeah, we have. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'd forgotten we did that.
Okay, have we got time for one more?
Yeah, I can see Alexandra with her hand up. Is that
Okay, Ali.
Did you say go for it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Thank you, Jo. I've got two things, but I just want to apologise before I even say them if you've already answered them in an amazing way and I missed them because I was trying to do bedtime and my dog was being crazy.
I love that possibility that I might have already answered something in an amazing way. Thank you.
So my first one is just my first one is just a curiosity for your feelings or thoughts around adult climate anxiety and the impact it can have in your ego on babies pre-birth and in early years, and if there's anything we could do, just your thoughts around that. And my second wondering was around the 0 to 3 examples that you gave, and also wonder whether this might apply to teenagers with neurology that's going on and regressions that happens around there. But anyway, let me just say it. So I was thinking about how you beautifully explained how we can just consciously join a child in an acceptance of a feeling. We can just acknowledge that they're feeling that and not try to change it, and we can just sit beside them. And I wondered, in relation to climate, and I think this is true because I think it is possible that really little children might hear language on media and stuff. I just wondered, from a neurological point of view, how that joining is kind of in contradiction to sort of ideas around early attachment security, that adults keep you safe, adults solve problems, we are your safe adults and we've got this, you don't need to worry about that. And we kind of can't say that about climate. So they were my two thoughts.
Oh, thank you very much. So let me check I'm understanding you. I think your first one was, what about adult climate anxiety? And you're particularly concerned about the impact on the unborn child, yeah? And the child's development of their stress system in the womb, and the impact of their mother's anxiety on them. That was your first question, is that right? And your second one was about, you know, as parents, we're there to keep them safe and hold them and solve problems. How do we cope with the fact that we're facing a problem that we can't solve? And how do we deal with that? Is that a sort of, it might be a bit clumsy, but a sort of summary of what you said?
Yeah, particularly in very little children, you know.
Little children.
Yeah. Particularly in very little children where there's a problem and mummy solves it or daddy solves it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the first question, there's a lot of research, as far as I'm aware, being pretty clear that the mother's stress state impacts the growing baby's stress system. That's the beauty of evolution. Children are born expecting the situation that their parents are facing. You know, it's a sort of a beautiful design, but it makes us very vulnerable. I don't like that research because I don't want to put any of that responsibility on to individual pregnant mothers, saying, right, you've got, you know, I remember it myself when I was pregnant, feeling hugely stressed and feeling even more stressed at the responsibility of, oh my God, my stress is going to harm my unborn child. You know, but I think we need to take a different look at this and recognize that it is our social and community responsibility to basically put our arms around people expecting babies and hold them and support them and empathize with them and care about their stress. That the problem with parental stress is not enough social support and not enough early support for, you know, we didn't have enough, we've grown up stressed because we didn't have enough emotional care in our childhoods. So of course we pass that on. So there's a place where I think we just need to have huge compassionate acceptance. Yeah, this is what's happening. And it's a social responsibility. We need to start gathering, building the community. There is no other way. We need our communities back. I think that's the strongest thing we need to do is get our communities back. And if we know people who are pregnant, is that we cuddle them, we look after them, we say, how are you feeling? And we learn how to protect them. Yeah, I'm getting a bit poetic and ranty there. And then the next question about adults, yeah, we're supposed to solve all the problems for our children. I think we haven't got time to say much about it, but one thing I want to say is that sometimes we mistake what the problem is that we're supposed to be solving. We cannot solve this problem of climate change, and it is it's agony, it's terrifying, but we need to be very clear that it's not that problem that it's our job to solve. The problem that we need to solve is our child being alone with that. That's the problem we need to solve. So yes, things are difficult. Yes, we're in a very difficult world, but darling, I'm here. I am here with you. That's what our children are longing for, not for us to know everything about sorting everything out, but to be there with them, whatever they go through. And then they can face anything. And of course, we need to do that for each other too. We can't find it out of nowhere. We've got to learn this. That's a partial answer, Ali, to your question, but I hope it's enough for now. Thank you. So what I'd like to do is bring this part of the meeting to end. We're going to switch off the recording, and then those of us who are here live are just going to spend a couple of minutes finishing together. So I'm just going to stop the recording. Thank you to those people who are watching on the recording, and I hope you found this useful.
Can I just say a couple of things by way of